Hey, well, some of you may be wondering, like, what in the world is this? Well, I'm a big fan of that Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, and Rita saw it in Chicago actually because she was such a big fan. But then I got into it on Disney Plus, and so I'm working on my own musical historical Broadway play, and it's going to be about Karl Marx, and so it'll be entitled Marx. So I'm going to give you a sample of what I'm working on now, and one song in particular called Let's Talk About Marx. Yes, Adam Smith talks about the division of labor, says it's going to be great because everybody will get rich later. But meanwhile, you're on the assembly line cutting cookie cutters over and over, doing the same thing over and over. That doesn't sound greater. To do the same thing over and over sounds like it would get old and lead you into alienation. It would be like my dog Rover rolling in four-leaf clover. Well, no, sorry, I'm freestyling some of this,
Let's talk about Marx, baby. Let's talk about the bourgeoisie. Let's talk about the proletariat and alienation in society. Let's talk about Marx. Let's talk about Marx.
Adam Smith, he wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776 just for kicks. Blueprint of capitalism. Saying everyone gets rich by the division of labor. But Karl Marx comes on the scene 100 years later and sees poverty in society in labor. And if I hear everybody's going to get rich, well, I heard a starving child in a coal mine ask Mr. Smith, when?
Let's talk about Marx, baby. Let's talk about the bourgeoisie.
Marx's objection to Smith's take on tech advancement. Yes, capitalism will produce labor-saving, efficiency-improving advancements. However, it is not the case that those advancements will improve the work life of the worker. If you get a time-saving device installed at your job, management will not pay you the same for less time at work. They'll find more work for you to do or cut your pay. You won't get more time with your playfellows.
Miss Ryder, do you know what it is like to work at a fast food restaurant?
Yeah, it's taking orders and making change.
No, that's not it. You've got things coming from the left and things coming from the right at you. It's a juggling act.
A juggling act? You mean like metaphorically?
No, I mean literally a juggling act.
Now here comes the part that relates to Marx. If you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean.
Alienation is separating you from your work in a way that makes your work unpleasant and unfulfilling. How free market capitalism causes alienation. Marx thinks emotionally investing ourselves in our work is how we flourish and are happy as human beings. But capitalism's efficient systems block us from being happy in our work.
Here's 3 ways in which capitalism causes alienation.
Doing the same repetitive task over and over is boring and makes work unfulfilling. If you work at the Christmas cookie factory icing cookies 14 hours a day, you'll get bored with the work.
Remember Adam Smith's pen factory? You know, if you're the one who sharpens the pen, doing a repetitive task over and over for 8, 12, 16 hours a day gets boring.
Mass production separates the worker from the object of her labor. If Granny makes cookies at home, she can be proud, but the icing worker does not get emotionally invested in her work. Think of it this way. The icing worker might not even know if the cookies taste good. She is cut off from the object of her labor in any way that allows her to realize herself as a person.
People find fulfillment through their work. So
That's one big problem with free market capitalism, like we've described, globalist capitalism, is that by going for the division of labor and mass production, it, Marx says, takes the charm out of a person's work.
Capitalism alienates by putting workers into fierce competition with one another. Instead of being able to relate to coworkers as human beings, you are, due to your fear of losing your means of survival, more likely to view other workers as enemies. We can easily imagine that the icing worker fears and demonizes workers in Mexico because she fears being replaced by someone who will do the job for less pay.
At this point, then, I think we can see two kinds of objections that Marx would make to Adam Smith.
First objection: free market capitalism harms people by alienating them. Well, we've seen how that works.
Marx's second objection to Smith: free market capitalism isn't really making everyone rich like Smith claimed.
You're a rich girl and you're gone too far, 'cause you know it don't matter anyway.
This is from Marx's big book, Das Kapital, a quotation from Mr. Broughton Charlton in 1860. Children of 9 or 10 years are dragged from their squalid beds at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning and compelled to work for a bare subsistence until 10, 11, or 12 at night, their limbs wearing away, their frames dwindling, their faces whitening.
Marx knew that you wouldn't take his word for it, so he got these cases out of the public records in Britain.
Hey, one thing I should mention to you, Marx believes that in prosperous times, workers can fare better. The problem with capitalism, he believes, is that when there's an economic downturn, it's the workers who suffer. Even the well-off workers get in really bad shape when things don't go well, when there's a crisis in the economy. One example he gives of this is the beds of Bristol during an economic downturn. And here's what he describes. Once again, he's quoting from a source, a public health report that was made in England in 1866. So I'm on page 817 of this brief volume, Marx Capital, Volume 1. Okay. The beds, and in that term I include any roll of dirty old rags or an armful of shavings, have an average of 3.3 persons to each. Many have 5 and 6 persons to each, and some people, I am told, are absolutely without beds. They sleep in their ordinary clothes on the bare boards, young men and women, married and unmarried, all together. I need scarcely add that many of these dwellings are dark, damp, dirty, stinking holes, utterly unfit for human habitations.
Now, Adam Smith predicted everybody was going to get rich, but 100 years have passed.
Morning Star newspaper, January 7th, 1867. They are dying of hunger. That is the simple and terrible fact. There are 40,000 of them. In our presence, in 1/4 of this wonderful metropolis, are packed, next door to the most enormous accumulation of wealth the world ever saw. Cheek by jowl with this are 40,000 helpless, starving people. These thousands are now breaking in upon the other quarters, always half starving. They cry their misery in our ears. They cry to heaven. They tell us from their miserable dwellings that it is impossible for them to find work and useless for them to beg.
With the promises of free market capitalism, the values that it purports to hold, everybody gets rich, everybody's going to make it, those values are just smoke and mirrors. The real goal of capitalism, in Marx's view, is it works for the interests of the bourgeoisie, the owner class, the people who own the factories, the 1%. We hear that now. And it makes them as much profit as possible. That's the purpose of it. and it doesn't mind exploiting people indefinitely in order to make those profits.
Let's talk about Marx, baby.
The bourgeoisie, wherever it has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor.
Remember that story Adam Smith told about the little boy who invented a string attachment to tie onto a valve in order to get more time with his playfellows? I remember it like it was yesterday.
He invented this in order to save himself work.
Well, here's what Marx says to that on page 437 of this briefer Penguin edition. The shortening of the working day, therefore, is by no means, Kenny's off today, I have to do this myself, is by no means what is aimed at in capitalist production when labor is economized by increasing its productivity. It is only the shortening of the labor time necessary for the production of a definite quantity of commodities that is aimed at. The fact that the worker, when the productivity of his labor has been increased, produces, say, 10 times as many commodities as before, and thus spends 1/10 as much labor time on each, by no means prevents him from continuing to work 12 hours a day as before, nor from producing in those 12 hours 1,200 articles instead of 120. Indeed, his working day may simultaneously be prolonged so as to make him produce, say, 1,400 articles in 14 hours.
In other words, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. Sweet, 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 sweet.